The Scottish Government's decision to abandon the target of reducing emissions by 75% by 2030 has stirred controversy, with critics labeling it as the worst environmental decision in the history of devolution. Environmental groups voiced their disappointment after Net Zero Secretary Mairi McAllan acknowledged that achieving the 2030 goal is now unattainable. Despite being legally binding, the government plans to introduce new legislation to revise climate change targets to better align with long-term policy objectives. The shift will move Scotland away from annual targets, which have been missed frequently, towards a 5-yearly carbon budget approach, similar to that adopted by the UK and Welsh governments. However, the commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2045 remains unchanged. The decision to scrap the interim 2030 target follows advice from the Climate Change Committee, CCC, which deemed it unrealistic. Nevertheless, the move has been met with disappointment, with Professor Piers Forster describing it as deeply disappointing. Imogen Dow from Friends of the Earth Scotland criticized the decision, labeling it as the worst environmental decision in the history of the Scottish Parliament. She argued that the target could and should have been met, accusing politicians of breaking promises and betraying constituents and vulnerable communities affected by climate change. Oxfam Scotland's Jamie Livingstone condemned the government's retreat from its legal targets, attributing it to inadequate action in the past. Opposition politicians also condemned the government's decision, with Scottish Conservative net zero spokesman Douglas Lumsden accusing it of failing to lead Scotland towards net zero. Labour's Sarah Boyack lamented Scotland's shift from a climate target leader to one that scraps targets. McAllan defended the decision, citing the challenging environmental context and UK government cutbacks. She emphasised the need to chart a feasible, fair, and just course to 2045, pledging a new package of climate action measures. These measures include plans to triple the number of charging points for electric vehicles and exploring a national integrated ticketing system for public transport. Pilot projects aimed at reducing emissions from agriculture and accelerating peatland restoration are also promised. However, McAllan highlighted the severe budgetary restrictions imposed by the UK government and the limitations of devolution, urging Westminster to reverse the capital budget cut to enable full delivery of the government's plans. She emphasised the importance of investing in net zero for the environment, society, and the economy, but lamented being held back by external constraints.